idea that normal, median salary making working Alabamians should be paying millionaires to send their kids to private school, and then we should revoke this tax cut on overtime wages, absolutely ludicrous.
There's this issue that's going to be coming up in the legislative session that I feel like is illustrative of some dynamics in the state. So last year, Anthony Daniels, and then after this we'll play the Joe Reed interview. Last year, Anthony Daniels, a Democrat in the state house, the minority leader in the state house, put forward a bill that eliminated taxes on overtime wages for workers in the state of Alabama. We actually, Adam and I, got some flack for our position on that, which was that we weren't super excited about it, just because of, kind of the generally, we do not want to incentivize the working of hours more than 40 in a work week. What we would want to do is punish employers who make it such that their employees need to work over 40 hours in a work week. That's what we would want to do, which is why we support overtime, which was introduced not as really a benefit for employees who work 50 hours in a week, although it does redound to the benefit of employees who work 50 hours in a week, but it is meant as a punishment for employers. There's saying, look, if you're going to make somebody work 45 hours in a work week instead of, or if you're going to make 4 people all work 50 hours a week instead of hiring a 6th person and everybody can only work 40 hours in a week, then we're going to punish you for that. And you're going to have to pay time and a half of what you pay during the first 40 hours, right? That's a punishment. And so we don't like to kind of incentivize the working of more than 40 hours in a week because we think it's bad for society. We think it's bad for our families if people are not able to be home. So we think it's bad. So, but also we did say, which I think some people maybe didn't hear last year when we were talking about this, we did say that, look, if we were in the legislature, we would probably vote for it if it came up, right? Just because, look, so many people get tax cuts in Alabama. Why not give tax cuts to people who work really hard? Okay. That's fine, I guess. And so that happened. It did. That happened. The legislature passed it. The governor signed it. And now, for now, wages are not taxed on hours worked over 40 in a work week. And this was a temporary provision because it was not clear exactly how much this would cost. The money is coming from the Education Trust Fund. And it was slated to sunset in June of 2025, and now the budget chair in the state Senate is making the radio rounds trying to lay the groundwork for the revocation of this tax cut for working people because he says that it looks like, and the numbers are not clear exactly, but it looks like it is costing a lot more than it was initially anticipated. So the initial estimate was like $40 million it would take out of the Education Trust Fund. And now apparently there's an estimate coming out that it took $230 million out of the Education Trust Fund in just 9 months. That's what one party is saying. But Anthony Daniels is saying that he has numbers that say that actually the and I have difficulty buying this because it sounds so it sounds difficult to imagine, but he says that the growth that was spurred by the tax cut has actually somehow increased revenue, and actually it hasn't lost revenue at all. It has increased revenue because it's put more money in the pockets of people who work more than 40 hours a week, and they're spending it in the economy, and so generally somehow the money is coming back. I'm not so sure that I buy that, frankly, but also even Senator Orr, who is the Senate budget chair, is said that the $230 million sounds like too much. So there's some confusion on the numbers, but he's like kind of running around and trying to lay the groundwork for not doing anything and allowing this tax cut to sunset. And in these conversations, when we're talking about things that are pulling money out of the Education Trust Fund, he only ever talks about this overtime tax cut. He does not talk about the school choice bill that came through that is sucking a minimum of $100 million a year out of the Education Trust Fund to people who are sending their kids to private school. And now for the first year, there's an income cap on it. So you're only eligible for it if you make less than a certain amount of dollars. I can't remember, but it's not too high, so it's not going to wealthy people just yet. But after the first or second year, the income cap is completely removed, and anybody who sends their children to private school will be able to get $7,000 per year per child from the Education Trust Fund to send their kids to private school, right? And so this is obviously a huge suck from the Education Trust Fund that is not being talked about. And so if we're talking about we need to raise money for the Education Trust Fund, what we should be doing is eliminating what will in effect and ultimately be a tax cut, a tax benefit for the wealthy in the terms of the school choice bill. That is going to be a tax cut for the wealthy, because in states where you have these universal school choice programs where anybody can get a voucher to send their kids to private schools, something like 80% of the recipients have incomes in like the top 5% in the state. Or so it's ridiculous. It is insane. And so the idea that normal median salary making working Alabamians should be paying millionaires to send their kids to a private school, and then we should revoke this tax cut on overtime wages, is just absolutely ludicrous. Hey, 5 seconds. Just wanted to say that this is only possible because of our donors. If you want to see more of this, then consider donating yourself at tvlr.fm/donate. But Adam, we've said you work for Alabama Arise. You're an organizer for Alabama Arise. It's a nonprofit progressive advocacy organization. There are other ways that you can raise revenue for the Education Trust Fund besides, again, trying to take more money out of the pockets of normal working people. Can you talk to us about some of those proposals that Alabama Arise has had in the past and some of your thoughts about this general conversation?
Yeah, absolutely. So, the first thing I'll say is that I'm just speaking as an individual. I'm not speaking in any official role, but I do know for sure that Alabama Arise, among others, has proposed removing the federal income tax deduction in Alabama. And this is a tax break that really disproportionately benefits the wealthy. And it makes sense when you think about it, because Alabama's income taxes and the federal income taxes are pretty different. The federal income tax is much more progressive, as in, the more money you make, the higher the rates get. And so the majority of folks who are actually benefiting from being able to deduct their federal income taxes from Alabama's taxes are folks who are on the upper income scale. So this is a proposal that Arise and others have made for some time now. It's come up particularly when the discussions around removing the grocery sales tax. And that's something I definitely want to point out, and it's important context, which is Alabama's taxation system is unfair and inadequate, right? It doesn't raise enough revenue to sustain quality public services. For example, the state doesn't even invest in public transportation, period, zero, right? And that's just an example. So we don't have enough money coming into the state of Alabama to have decent public services that would account for, even an average American quality of life. At the same time, the money that is raised is disproportionately on the backs of poor and working class Alabamians. We have a regressive tax structure. It relies heavily on sales taxes. It relies heavily on tax breaks to the wealthy and to corporations. So ordinary working people are taxed left and right, fines and fees and taxes on our groceries, taxes on our medicines. Whereas, wealthier families and certainly, the big corporations are able to enjoy all sorts of loopholes and incentives and advantages. So the federal income tax deduction, it is unfair. The median taxpayer in Alabama gets about $60, $60 to $70 off of that. That's their benefit. The top 1% of taxpayers, so people who make over $1 million, they are benefiting from this loophole to the amount of about 12 to 13,000, right? So they don't need an extra 12 to 13,000, and that's money that absolutely could pay for this overtime tax. In fact, if you remove the federal income tax deduction from the Alabama tax code, you could not only pay for this revenue that's missing from the overtime tax, assuming, that that's the case, right? It could pay for the overtime tax cut. It could also pay to remove the rest of the grocery sales tax, because folks may remember a little bit has been removed, but there's still taxes on groceries. So if you remove the federal income tax deduction, that would replace this revenue to the education trust fund, because that's a concern that I think a lot of us have had all along, including with this overtime tax cut, which is, of course, we want working people to be taxed less. We want a less regressive tax system for everyday people, working class folks. But at the same time, we don't want to gut our public schools in the process, right? Our public schools are already not funded adequately for the massive needs that we have in the state. So, we don't want to see a loss in important public school funding. But this is a way that certainly you could remove this tax break. You could raise, over $800 million was the estimate I saw. It would be more than enough to replace the revenue for our schools, both with the grocery tax and this overtime tax. But then, you think more broadly, and, there are so many different ways you could replace this revenue. Like you said, right. There are school choice programs that they have just installed, right? Like at the same legislative session.
Yes.
The same session, the very same session. So if you were concerned about this, you wouldn't have done that, right? So you could look at the school vouchers, not just the CHOOSE Act, but the Alabama Accountability Act. Look at how much we're giving away there. You could also look at these massive corporate incentive packages. If I recall correctly, the auto industry alone has benefited over $1 billion worth of incentives from the state of Alabama. And if you look at that education trust fund budget, if you actually go through it line by line, you can find plenty of pork that's coming out of that budget that's benefiting folks that I would argue shouldn't be benefiting from that.
Yeah,
money.
I mean, I think there was even one that was like some ETF money, some education trust fund money is paying for a water park in Montgomery or something like that. I mean, there's lots of stuff that you could go to before, again, trying to pull money out of the pockets of working people again. You just saw a clip from the Valley Labor Report. We are live every Saturday morning from 9:30 a.m. till 12:30 p.m. And we pride ourselves on keeping all of our content free to everybody so that we can talk to as many working folks as possible. If you support the work that we're doing, you think that it's important, you think that it's good, then consider making a monthly contribution to the project, and you can do that on our website, tvlr.fm.